classroom was quiet, save for the soft rustling of papers and the occasional sniffle from the back row. Mrs. Carter, the third-grade teacher at Willow Creek Elementary, stood at the front of the room, her warm eyes scanning the faces of her students. It was a typical Wednesday afternoon, and the children were working on their math worksheets. Well, most of them were. In the back, little Rachel sat with her head resting on her arms, her worksheet barely touched. A few tears glistened on her cheeks, and her pencil lay abandoned beside her. "Rachel, honey?" Mrs. Carter said gently, walking over to her desk. "What's wrong?" Rachel looked up, her voice trembling. "I'm so slow, Mrs. Carter. Everyone else is already on question 10, and I'm still on number 3. I'll never catch up. Why can't I be fast like them?" Mrs. Carter knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from Rachel's face. "Oh, Rachel, being fast isn't everything. Let me tell you a story. It's about a tortoise and a hare. Would you like to hear it?" Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes, and the rest of the class perked up, eager for a break from their worksheets. Mrs. Carter smiled and began. "Once upon a time, in a bright green forest filled with tall trees and winding paths, there lived a hare. This hare was the fastest creature around. His legs were like lightning, and he loved to brag about it. 'No one can beat me,' he'd say, hopping around with his fluffy tail held high. Everyone in the forest knew it was true, too. He'd race the squirrels, the foxes, even the birds, and he'd always win. Then there was the tortoise. The tortoise wasn't fast at all. His little legs moved so slowly that you could count the blades of grass he passed with every step. He wasn't flashy or loud like the hare. He just kept to himself, plodding along, doing his work day after day. The other animals didn't pay him much attention, but the tortoise didn't mind. He liked his steady pace. One sunny morning, the hare was bouncing around the forest, showing off as usual. He spotted the tortoise trudging along with a bundle of leaves on his back. "Hey, tortoise," the hare called, laughing. "You're so slow. I bet you couldn't even race a snail and win." The tortoise looked up, his wise old eyes calm, and said, "I may be slow, but I'd like to race you, hare." The hare nearly fell over laughing. "You? Race me? That's the funniest thing I've ever heard. Fine, let's do it. Tomorrow at sunrise, right here by the big oak tree. We'll race to the river and back." The tortoise nodded. "It's a deal." The next morning, all the forest animals gathered to watch. The squirrels chattered in the branches, the birds perched on the oak tree, and even the wise old owl came to see what would happen. The race began with a shout, "Go!" And off went the hare, a blur of fur and speed. The tortoise took his first step, then his second, moving at his usual crawl. The hare zoomed ahead, kicking up dust as he went. He reached the river in no time, turned around and looked back. The tortoise was barely a speck in the distance. "This is too easy," the hare said to himself. "I've got plenty of time. Why not take a little nap? That slowpoke won't catch up for hours." So he flopped down under a shady tree, closed his eyes, and fell fast asleep. Meanwhile, the tortoise kept going. Step by step, he moved along the path. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the forest grew warm, but he didn't stop. He didn't complain or look around to see where the hare was. He just focused on the next step, then the next. The animals watching started to whisper. "Look at him go," they said. "He's not giving up." Hours passed, and the hare finally woke up. He yawned, stretched, and glanced back toward the starting line. To his shock, he saw the tortoise, way closer than he'd expected, plodding steadily toward the river. "What?" the hare yelped. He leapt to his feet and dashed off, determined to finish first. But it was too late. The tortoise